The Hollywood Unapologetic Podcast with Orlando Delbert, Filmmaking Essentials. Political campaigns using film.
Yeah.
It feels modern, right?
Yeah.
But the roots go way back.
Yeah, much further than you probably think, actually. Back to, like, the 1930s.
And linked to propaganda, really. A very different context.
It's amazing how campaign films grew out of that, out of state-controlled stuff, and that's exactly what we're into today.
Leni Riefenstahl's 1935 film, Triumph of the Will.
That's the one. A huge controversial piece.
Absolutely. We've pulled together some really interesting sources.
Yeah. What have we got?
We've got film as a political medium, bits from Open Culture, the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum's Experiencing History, insights from research in film and history, facing history in ourselves, and even a really great discussion from Reddit's Ask Historians.
Oh, Ask Historians can be brilliant. So our goal here is to really unpack Triumph of the Will, isn't it?
Yeah, understand why it's so significant. It's not just some historical artifact.
No, definitely not. It's this powerful, still debated case study of film as a political tool.
And we want to look at its lasting impact while also, navigating its controversial nature.
Exactly. It's a tricky one.
Okay, so let's start by looking at the circumstances around the film. It's fundamentally pro-Hitler propaganda,
Pretty much. It was made to document the 1934 Nuremberg Congress.
Right. And the aim, according to Kershaw, was to show the strength and unity of the Nazi Party.
Exactly. Project this image of power, cohesion. A visual statement.
And it's interesting that Hitler himself apparently wanted the film to be aesthetic, not political. Levinson points this out.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? A deliberate move to appeal more broadly.
To people who maybe weren't directly engaged with politics.
Precisely, which brings up how propaganda often works best,
How so?
Well, the really effective stuff often weaves its ideology into something that looks neutral or even artistic.
So focusing on the visuals could reach more people, influence them subtly.
That seems to be the idea. Broaden the reach.
And timing-wise, this was all happening right after the Night of the Long Knives, wasn't it?
Yes, a very bloody purge within the party itself.
Yet our sources say the film completely ignores this.
Yeah.
Just doesn't mention it.
Yeah, not a word.
Why do you think that is? Seems like a pretty major omission.
Well, that omission is key to the propaganda strategy, really.
How do you mean?
To project that image of perfect unity and strength, you absolutely cannot acknowledge internal conflict and purges.
Right. It would totally undermine the message.
Exactly. It was all about crafting this very carefully controlled version of reality.
Which brings us to Leni Riefenstahl herself. She claimed she just wanted to make an artistic film. But at the same time, she clearly supported Hitler. It feels like a real contradiction.
It's definitely complex and much debated. She later emphasized her artistic side, of course.
But her connections were undeniable.
Her close ties to the regime, her active role in making this incredibly potent propaganda, it makes it very hard to separate the art from the politics it served.
Yeah, that tension is central to the whole thing, isn't it? The legacy.
It really is. Artistic ambition versus political alignment.
And the film clearly had enormous resources behind it.
Oh, absolutely.
Our Reddit highlights
Yep.
it was backed by the full force of the Nazi propaganda machine.
Yeah, the whole apparatus. Now, the Reddit discussion does mention a relatively modest direct budget, around 280,000 Reichsmarks.
Okay, that doesn't sound that huge for a major film.
No, but the key thing is the Nazi Party and the military handled a massive amount of the logistics.
So transport, personnel, equipment, all that was covered.
Exactly. That level of organizational backing was incredibly valuable, far beyond just the cash budget.
Right. And the Reddit thread even mentions Riefenstahl wrote this detailed booklet about the planning and production.
She did, which just shows how deliberate it all was.
This wasn't just capturing events as they happened.
Not at all. That level of pre-production emphasizes the careful choices made in every single aspect, from the big themes down to the camera angles.
Okay, let's talk about those cinematic techniques. The USHML article mentions Riefenstahl used pioneering cinematic techniques to show the regime as disciplined, energetic.
Things like dramatic low angles and these dynamic moving shots.
Yeah, from cars, elevators, even airplanes, like you said.
How did those specific techniques add to the film's message?
Well, it's fascinating how they amplified the impact. That dynamic camera work, as USHMM notes, creates this incredible sense of scale, of energy.
It almost puts you right there in the middle of it all.
Exactly. And that quote from Stella Brucey in Film as a Political Medium really fits here, about documentary being negotiation between the real event and its representation.
So Riefenstahl wasn't just recording, she was shaping the audience's experience.
Actively shaping it.
Definitely. And film as a political medium also mentions stylistic devices like tonal montage.
Right, using the emotional tone of images.
And symbolic shots, like Hitler's plane looking like it forms a cross. That seems incredibly deliberate.
Oh, absolutely intentional. These weren't random choices at all. So the montage would evoke specific feelings.
Mm-hmm. And those symbolic shots were clearly designed to elevate Hitler's image, give him this almost messianic quality, perhaps.
Wow. Our source from research in film and history even talks about a Riefenstahl school influencing German documentary style.
Yeah, her camera work, editing, use of music, she was definitely seen as an innovator in technique.
But, and this is interesting, the Reddit discussion, we looked at questions that...
Right. It asks, is this idea of her as some great innovator maybe overstated? Could that itself be a form of Nazi propaganda?
That's a really important counterpoint. We need to look critically at those claims of innovation.
Absolutely. And think about the context they were made in. Does focusing too much on her techniques maybe distract from the film's actual goals?
Yeah, the propagandistic ones. The Reddit thread compares her approach to city symphony films and montage like Eisenstein.
Mm-hmm. Podofkin, too.
But it stresses that Riefenstahl's choices were very specifically aimed at promoting the Nazi agenda. It wasn't art for art's sake.
Precisely. She might have used existing techniques, but how she used them was highly deliberate, serving the specific aims of Nazi propaganda.
It wasn't just capturing imagery.
No, it was meticulously crafting a very, very particular narrative.
Okay, let's shift more directly to the propaganda itself. Film as a political medium highlights how the film intentionally blurs the lines.
Between the Nazi Party, Germany, and the German people, right?
Yeah, it basically tries to indoctrinate viewers, make them believe Nazism is Germany. Why is that blurring so effective?
Well, it's a classic propaganda tactic and a really effective one.
How so?
By making the party seem identical to the nation and its people, it discourages any dissent. It creates this sense of collective identity built only around the Nazi ideology.
No room for alternatives.
None at all.
And Frank Capra, he called triumph a psychological weapon in his Why We Fight series. That's according to both film as a political medium and the Reddit source.
That's a really strong statement, isn't it?
It really underscores how powerful the film was perceived to be, even by opponents.
Capra saw its potential to influence, to manipulate viewers on a deep psychological level. He understood its power to shape beliefs, to weaken resistance.
And the portrayal of Hitler, almost godlike, a savior figure, that comes up in film as a political medium and the USHMM article.
Yeah, that deification is another key part of totalitarian propaganda.
What effect would that have had back then?
By elevating Hitler to this almost mythical status, the film aimed to inspire absolute loyalty, unquestioning obedience.
And it wasn't all just spontaneous footage, was it? USHMM points out some scenes were staged.
Speeches delivered multiple times just for the cameras.
What does that tell us about the film's claim to be a documentary?
Well, it pretty much undermines it, doesn't it? It highlights that it was a carefully orchestrated performance.
Designed to create a specific impression, not just document reality.
Exactly.
The film also really emphasizes things like fixing unemployment during the Great Depression. The German labor front sequence, USHMM mentions that.
Yes, focusing on a major societal problem like that was very strategic, a way to gain popular support.
By showing the Nazi regime as supposedly successful in tackling unemployment.
It aimed to connect with people's real economic anxieties at the time, offer a solution, essentially.
And USHMM also points out how the film deliberately invoked World War I memories.
Yeah, to create this sense of shared camaraderie, shared history.
It seems like every element was carefully chosen for its persuasive effect.
Absolutely. Tapping into shared experiences, feelings of national unity. It was all about forging this powerful emotional connection between the viewers and the Nazi cause.
That slogan sums it up. One people, one leader, one realm Germany.
Perfectly encapsulates that manufactured unity.
Now here's something fascinating from the Reddit discussion. Goebbels, the propaganda minister himself, reportedly disliked the style of Triumph of the Will.
Yeah, that's a really surprising detail. Preferred a different approach to propaganda, apparently.
What do you make of that?
It suggests that even at the top, there wasn't necessarily agreement on what the most effective propaganda looked like.
So Triumph might not have been universally loved even within the party's inner circle.
Seems that way. Goebbels' preference for other methods highlights that.
And the Reddit thread also mentions the film got a mixed reception abroad.
Right. in countries where the Nazi Party was already viewed with more skepticism.
So it wasn't universally persuasive outside Germany.
No, and that's an important reminder. Propaganda's effectiveness really varies depending on the audience, their existing beliefs, their context.
Where people were already wary of the Nazis, the message might not have landed the same way.
Exactly.
Okay, let's delve into some of the contested stuff. The different versions, the missing pieces. Research in film and history discusses missing Reichswehr sequences, the German army bits.
Mm-hmm. And the debate about whether they were even in the original premiere version?
Why is there so much uncertainty about something like that?
It really highlights the messiness of the film's history as a physical object. You've got conflicting accounts from Riefenstahl herself, contemporary reviews.
So it's just not clear what was shown initially.
It seems not. And the fact that Hitler and military leaders apparently wanted those sequences kept in, that points to different priorities clashing during production.
Riefenstahl claimed the studio, UFA, put them back in without her knowing.
Right. But then there's that review from the time mentioning cavalry exercises.
So without the original censorship records, which are apparently missing.
We might never know for sure. It leaves room for speculation and complicates Riefenstahl's whole narrative about her artistic control.
And there are definitely different versions out there now. Research in film and history talks about abridged cuts made later.
Yeah, by MoMA in the US and George Stevens for the Nazi Plan.
What was the purpose of those different cuts? Very different contexts, right?
Completely different. MoMA's version was initially just for informing US government officials during the war.
Okay. And Stevens's.
The Nazi Plan actually repurposed footage from Triumph as direct evidence for the Nuremberg trials.
Wow. Using the propaganda against its creators.
Precisely.
It's incredible that President Roosevelt reportedly didn't want the MoMA version shown publicly at first.
Yeah, worried about its potential propaganda effect, even shortened.
That really speaks to the film's perceived power, doesn't it? Even cut down.
Definitely. The U.S. government understood how persuasive visual media could be.
And that little anecdote about Luis Buñuel claiming he edited the MoMA version, which turned out to be false.
Yeah, that's a strange side note. Just shows the film's notoriety, I guess, and the stories that get attached to it.
But the use of Triumph footage as evidence at Nuremberg in the Nazi plan, that's hugely significant.
Well, absolutely. It directly linked the defendants, the Nazi leadership, to the events, the ideology, the whole spectacle shown in the film.
Like a visual record to hold them accountable.
Exactly. And they even showed it to Rudolf Hess, apparently, because he was claiming amnesia, to confront him with the visual reality of the regime.
And the editing styles were different too, weren't they? MoMA versus the Nazi plan.
Completely. MoMA's cut focused more on the visual spectacle, the impressive sequences.
Whereas the Nazi plan
Really zeroed in on identifying specific individuals and proving early militarization, using the same footage for totally different aims.
It just shows how much editing shapes meaning and impact.
Profoundly. The wartime adaptations had very specific goals.
Okay, fast forward to the 1970s. Research in film and history talks about German TV broadcasts.
Mm-hmm. And the legal battles over copyright, who had the rights to show it.
It sounds like Riefenstahl kept a lot of control.
She did. She had a commercial agreement with the German Federal Republic, but retained control over non-commercial use until she died.
That really highlights the complex legal and ethical issues still surrounding it.
Absolutely. And the Imperial War Museum apparently criticized the fees Transit Film was charging. It was all very contentious.
And the controversy around the historian Joachim Fest's commentary during one broadcast.
Right. It shows how sensitive the film remained decades later.
People reacted strongly to his attempt to provide historical context.
They did. It highlights that ongoing difficulty separating the film's aesthetic qualities, which are undeniable, from its deeply problematic content. Even East Germany weighed in critically.
Then there's Riefenstahl's own director's cut, a shorter version.
Yeah, missing the Reichswehr sequence and an outdoor concert scene. She claimed it was for artistic reasons.
What do you make of that later version?
Well, presenting it as her definitive cut just further complicates things. The question of her original intentions, the film's true form.
Maybe another attempt to distance herself from the more militaristic bits.
It's certainly possible to see it that way.
And just to add another layer of confusion, some 16mm copies apparently have chapters swapped around.
Right, messing up the sequence of the rally events depicted.
It's just amazing how many versions and alterations this film has gone through.
It really underscores its journey through history, the different ways it's been used and interpreted, a testament to its enduring, if controversial, significance.
Which brings us right back to that really difficult question. Documentary or propaganda?
The big one.
Riefenstahl, after the war, insisted it was a documentary film. Her argument was no voiceover narration.
Yeah, that was her distinction. Documentary, no voiceover. Propaganda, voiceover.
That feels flimsy.
It's highly problematic, yeah. As research in film and history points out, it's ultimately unconvincing.
Just because there's no narrator doesn't mean it isn't propaganda.
Exactly. The lack of a voiceover doesn't negate the meticulous construction of reality. The careful selection, the exclusion, the camera angles, the editing.
All working together to persuade, even silently.
Precisely. It's a powerful form of propaganda, voiceover or not.
And Albert Speer's claims later about speeches being reshot in a Berlin studio.
Mm-hmm. And Riefenstahl partially admitted it, at least regarding Julia Streicher's speech.
That really undermines her claim of just documenting what happened.
Completely. It demonstrates deliberate manipulation of reality to get the desired effect. And it seems likely Otto Dietrich's speech was reshot too.
Adds weight to the idea of it being a constructed event.
Definitely. And the workers' choir sequence.
Yep.
Also apparently staged.
Another example of crafting moments, not just recording them.
Right. Creating this specific impression of unity, enthusiastic support that maybe wasn't quite the spontaneous reality.
And the omissions. What the film doesn't show.
Hmm.
That's incredibly telling too.
Oh, hugely important. The tense atmosphere between Hitler and the SA after the Purge. Gone.
Other events left out too. Press receptions, cultural conferences.
Yeah. Anything that didn't fit the narrative. Any negative imagery, any dissent, anything crude, ugly, or critical, as one source puts it.
Even the portrayal of women is limited, isn't it?
Very. Either ecstatic supporters or passive spectators.
It's a highly idealized, sanitized picture.
Completely. By consciously leaving out anything imperfect, Riefenstahl created this flawless image.
And it's fascinating that amateur footage from the same time apparently shows a very different picture.
Yeah, much less idealized. People playing cards on a train, a more ordinary atmosphere.
A stark contrast to Riefenstahl's polished vision.
It really highlights the selective nature of her documentary. Amateur film caught a more varied reality. Triumph presented a meticulously curated narrative.
Okay, finally, let's think about the iconography and legacy. Research in film and history calls it a media event.
Mm-hmm. Documenting and staging the merging of Hitler the political leader with Hitler the pop icon.
That's a really interesting way to frame it. The film didn't just record the rally.
No, it actively created and spread Hitler's iconic image. The ceremonies, amplified by Riefenstahl's camera, were crucial to that transformation.
And the swastika. It's everywhere in the film, almost a super icon.
Yeah, that constant visual repetition reinforces its symbolic power, its centrality to the Nazi visual identity. It aimed for maximum reach and impact.
And analyzing specific iconic shots, like that bird's eye view of the marching troops.
Mm-hmm. You can see connections to contemporary photography movements like the New Vision.
So she was drawing on existing visual culture, but also shaping it.
Exactly. Those striking compositions made the film aesthetically powerful, memorable. It engaged with broader artistic trends.
And the title itself, Triumph of the Will, has been referenced so often since.
Absolutely. The title, variations of it. They've entered the cultural lexicon. It's solidified the film's place in collective memory.
It's become shorthand, even for people who haven't seen it.
That's right.
Research in film and history even digs into where will in the title might come from. Hoffman's book, Nietzschean Philosophy,
And maybe even drug use. It's quite a range.
shows the symbolic weight, the different interpretations people have layered onto it.
Definitely adds another layer to its meaning.
And it's interesting how the film fit into existing trends, like those German Bergfilm mountain films.
Yeah, but it also became this huge locomotive of audiovisual culture, as the source says.
Meaning its motifs got quoted, recreated later.
Exactly. It drew upon trends, but then significantly influenced subsequent filmmaking. Its visual impact echoed through visual media.
That interpretation from Slavoj Žižek is thought-provoking too. National Socialism and Triumph by extension as this weird mix.
Reactionary and avant-garde elements together, yeah.
It's not easy to categorize.
No. Žižek's analysis highlights that complexity. Innovative techniques serving a deeply regressive ideology. That tension is key to its power and why it still makes us uncomfortable.
And the direct influence. The end ceremony inspiring the awards scene in Star Wars, A New Hope.
Yeah, and potentially The Lion King, too.
That's pretty surprising. Shows the lasting visual impact, even in totally unrelated contexts, decades later.
It really demonstrates how pervasive Triumph's visual language became.
So ultimately, all our sources seem to land here. Triumph of the Will is incredibly powerful propaganda with a deeply complicated legacy.
Yeah. You just can't separate its cinematic achievements, which were real, from the hateful ideology it promoted so effectively.
It's recognized as groundbreaking cinema and potent propaganda. That creates an ongoing challenge.
How do we engage with it? Its aesthetic brilliance can't be divorced from the horrific ideology it served.
And the Reddit discussion reminds us it's still available in the US. And about Frank Capra's direct response with Why We Fight.
Mm-hmm. And Riefenstahl's 1938 U.S. visit to promote Olympia.
Where Hollywood basically shunned her because of her Nazi ties.
Right. Shows there was immediate awareness and condemnation in the U.S. even before the full horrors of the Holocaust were widely known.
And her persistent denial of knowing about the Holocaust right up until her death.
Just further complicates her legacy, doesn't it?
Triumph of the Will is just this incredibly complex, still relevant film.
Undeniably innovative cinematically, but also profoundly potent propaganda, deeply tied to a horrific ideology.
And its lasting impact on filmmaking, on our understanding of visual media's power, that's undeniable too.
It remains a crucial case study. Film, politics, cultural memory, it's all wrapped up in there.
So here's a final thought to leave listeners with. Considering this film's aesthetic power, its undeniable role in promoting hate, how should we approach powerful, controversial media like this today?
Yeah, what's the responsibility? For filmmakers, for viewers?
Yeah.
How do we understand the context, the potential influence?
Definitely something important for all of us to think about. You can find more insights on navigating the entertainment industry and achieving success in Orlando Delbert's work, including his book, Pollyanna's Tear-Soaked Battlefields of Hollywood, a survival guide against the cynicism and the hypocritical, and of course, the Hollywood Unapologetic platform. And always remember, you are the key to your own success. You are the new Hollywood generation.
Be informed, be prepared, and most importantly, be great.
That's it. Be great. Good luck out there.
See you next time.